In the name of one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. There's an old expression that goes, God never gives us more than we can handle. Now, I don't know who the person was who first spoke those words, but if I ever meet them, I'm going to call them a liar. First off, God doesn't give us most of the things that we are struggling with, the things that are on our plate. In many cases, the things that we're dealing with are things that come from our own choices, decisions we have made. Sometimes they come from our family, sometimes they come from the world. The world is broken, and suddenly you find yourself with just more than you can handle. If I were going to respond to that statement, my response would typically be, God never gives us more than God can handle. And that's really what our gospel lesson is about today. The 6th chapter of Luke is partly known as the Beatitudes. Now, when we hear those words, we typically think of Matthew's Beatitudes. Matthew writes in his 5th chapter about how Jesus gives the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus goes up on the hill and he speaks down to God's people. And in Matthew's gospel, there are 9 Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. In Luke's gospel, Jesus doesn't go up on the mountain. Jesus goes down into the plains, into the flatlands, where the people are. And as opposed to Matthew, Jesus is not talking down to the people. In Luke's gospel, he's standing there with them in their suffering and their struggles. Now, Matthew is writing to a community that is mostly made up of Jewish people, in fact, wealthy Jewish people. They're well educated, they know the law, they obey the law, and Matthew is trying to convince them through his writing that this guy, Jesus from Nazareth, was truly the Messiah, God's chosen one coming into the world to save them. And so in Matthew's gospel, we have a lot of references to the Old Testament, and Matthew will say, and as it was written, Jesus did such and such. Well, Luke's gospel is a little different. In fact, Luke's gospel is my favorite gospel of the 4. Because Luke is writing to not these wealthy Jewish people, he's writing to Gentiles and Jewish people who are not wealthy, who are considered to be on the outside, the unlovable, the untouchables. Luke is all about the forgotten. And so his Beatitudes are a little different. Where Matthew writes, blessed are the poor in spirit, he's talking to people who already have all they need. But you might be missing part of your spiritual life with God. Luke doesn't go in that direction. Luke says, blessed are the poor, the people who don't have 2 shillings to rub together. Blessed are the poor because theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, not later, now. For you will be filled, maybe in this lifetime and maybe in the next. Blessed are you who weep now, because I know your pain. I know the struggles that you're going through. I know how broken your heart is. But one day you'll laugh again. And blessed are you when people hate you, because there is going to come a day when you will rejoice. You will leap for joy, because surely your reward in heaven will be great. Luke is talking to the people who are suffering now in this world. Now, in order to understand what Luke is trying to do here, let's go back to what's happening just before Luke writes these words. Jesus is in the middle of his ministry. He's going from town to town, and he's coming to this one town where a large crowd has heard about who Jesus is. He's the healer. He's the Messiah. We want to go get close to him. We've heard that he's healed so many people, and the people come. And he speaks the love of God, the forgiveness of God, the grace of God. But what they want most of all is to reach out and touch Jesus. They had heard the stories about that woman who had been sick for 12 years, and all she did was crawl through the crowd and reach out and touch the hem of Jesus' cloak, and she was made healed. And they want Jesus to reach out and touch them, or simply them to reach out and touch Jesus. They wanted their pain and their suffering to go away now. And Jesus gathers with them, and he looks upon them, and his heart is broken. And he says, I know you're suffering. And I want to do what I can for you, and I will do what I can for those who are here, but there's going to be other people who are not going to make it here. There are going to come people who are going to come looking for me, and I'm already going to be gone. And in fact, Luke is writing to a community of people where Jesus has already died, risen, and ascended into heaven. And Luke's people are suffering now, just as you and I are suffering now. Luke is saying, even though Jesus is not here with us, hang in there. Keep the faith. Believe that God is with you through all things. As the 23rd Psalm says, God will lead us through the valley of the shadow of death, not into it. He will see us through the cave of darkness into the light. That's what Sunday morning was in the resurrection. When we studied this last night at the 5 o'clock service, as we were singing our opening hymns, I was looking at the people who came, and I thought to myself, this is going to be a very powerful message tonight. Because the people who had gathered there last night to hear these words was a woman who has recently lost her husband to cancer, and just found out her brother now has the same cancer. Another woman had just found out that she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer for the second time. Another woman who was there because she lost her job, she lost her family, she's lost a sense of herself and doesn't know which way to turn. Another woman is there, and she has lost her husband, she has lost her job, and now she has very little to care for herself. And a woman who came for her first time, she came and she said during our discussion, when I go to the grocery store now, I've got to be careful. I only buy the things I need, not the things I want. Luke was talking to those people last night. Just as I look around today and know that God is talking to us here today. God is saying, keep the faith. The suffering, the tragedy that you're going through right now is real. But God has not forsaken you. Please don't forsake God. As Paul writes in one of his letters, he says, we boast in God. God is the creator of all things. We wouldn't be here without God. And yet, as much as we boast about how good God is, we also boast in our suffering, because we identify our suffering with the suffering of Christ. The suffering of Christ shows the love of God for us, and our suffering shows the love of God in our lives. Paul goes on to say, because suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And I may have gotten those out of order, I just realized. But the end is, it gives us hope. Suffering and character and enduring gives us hope. And Paul says, and hope does not disappoint us. You're going to hear in our Eucharistic prayer how Paul talks about the fact that he has finished the race. He has run the good race, and now he is ready for the crown. But Paul suffered. And God's message to us is, I know that you're suffering, but there will come a time, there will come a day when all tears will be wiped from their eyes. Now, as I was reading the commentary, it was highlighted that says, now preachers, be careful. You may want to preach strictly on the blessed are they. Don't forget the woes. Woe. Woe are you who are rich, because you've received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, because there's going to come a day where you're going to hunger. Woe to you who are laughing now, because there's going to be a day where you will cry. And woe to you when all speak of you well, because so did your ancestors at false prophets. It sounds like, and I started a sermon many years ago with, Jesus said in the Bible that if you're poor, you're going to heaven, and if you're rich, you're going to hell. Oh, come on, people, that was funny. Let me give it to you again. If you're poor, you're going to heaven. If you're rich, you're going to hell. Going well. All right. I can't even do it. Jesus never said that. The Bible to me says if you are blessed and you've received a lot of material things here on earth, you have a choice. You can either use that to your own personal benefit, or you can use those gifts that God has given you to care for those who are less fortunate. And I will say that's what St. Mark's does very, very well. We have been blessed, and we bless those in this community. Why? Because God first loved us. And so what Luke is saying is, woe, he's saying, watch out, be careful. Don't let material things stand between you and God. If you have them, use them to the glory of God. If you don't have them, then blessed are the poor. Today we celebrate All Saints Sunday, and in just a moment we will be reading the names of those who have died, either family or friends, this past year. And it may surprise you how many, in just a year's time, how many candles we will light. But think of these people as their names are read, and think of the people in your life, throughout your life, who have been saints to you. We talked last week about knowing that we're sinners. People tell us all the time, ministers tell us all the time that we're wretched sinners, but we're also saints. Paul tells us that at one time we were both saints and sinners. Saints are the people who don't go out and do things on their own. Saints are the people who allow themselves to be used to the glory of God, and those things that happen are God's will, God's work. Reminds me of a little boy being asked in Sunday school, who are the saints? And he was remembering in his church the stained glass windows that are pictures with people in them. And he said, the saints are the people that the light shines through. Does the light shine through in your life? I will tell you about one woman who, in St. Peter's, her name was Thelma Klein, and her husband were our youth group leaders. And I think they were probably about 60 years old or so. I thought they were about 100. But she was my saint. She was there for me when nobody else was. When my family, my parents couldn't understand, she would be the one to listen. And on her tombstone, it will not say saint, but I will call her a saint in my heart. Reflect on those names heard today. And remember the final verse of this gospel lesson, because it all comes down to this. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's not that hard. Amen.